Now, even if you're not a Jesus follower, I think there are practical reasons that we should live without complaining. There's actually a doctor named Dr. Travis Bradberry, and he wrote a good book, great book actually, called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And he's just done a lot of research on the idea of complaining. And what he says is that repeated complaining conditions the brain to do, guess what? More complaining. He and others talk about what it means to have this kind of negative mindset, that before long, we enter into what they call confirmation bias. In other words, we expect something to be bad, therefore, we get what we expect. When it comes to complaining, we don't think that it's that big of a deal. I mean, we just kind of think it's harmless. But here's the thing about complaining. Complaining contaminates. It always contaminates our relationship. I want you to think about this. Think about the unhappiest person you know. I mean, they're negative and they're bitter and they complain about everything. I mean, they are miserable all the time. And you know what you do? You don't want to spend any time with that person. In fact, you even go out of your way, I would bet, to avoid them. But there's another layer to complaining that we don't think about. It contaminates our lives as well. Let me show you how you can be miserable, okay? I'm just going to show you how to do this. Here's what you need to do. If you want to just hate your job, for the rest of your life, complain about it every single day. I mean, you complain about your commute to work and the people you work with and the lousy benefits and your boss doesn't know what he's doing and how you're undervalued, and you just keep doing that. And I guarantee you, you're going to think you'll be miserable at work. If you're not fully miserable, let me tell you how you can be even more miserable. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to just keep complaining. Complain about the weather, the economy, politicians, the way people drive, which I honestly complain about that, about your physical features, that you were once a stud and now you're a dud. Complain about the long line at the grocery store. Complain about the way your neighbors don't keep their yards up the way that they should. Complain about what people are posting on social media. And then listen, if that's not enough and you want to even complain more and be even more miserable, here's what I want you to do. I want you to complain about the person that you're with. I want you to nitpick them to death. The way that they chew their food, the way that their hair is falling out, it's clogging up the shower drain, it kind of drives you nuts. The way they dress, they don't pick up after themselves, how lazy they are, and they don't meet your needs. And listen, if you just keep complaining, you'll ruin that relationship. Complaining contaminates both our relationships with other people, and it contaminates us. I want to take some time and look at a very, I think, extremely challenging passage written by Paul. And he writes this passage while he's in prison. And let me just give you a little backstory to this, and it's really important. Paul had been traveling throughout Europe, starting churches. And then he goes back to Jerusalem, and he goes to the temple to teach about Jesus. Well, the Jewish leaders were furious that he's there. And so they have a mob attack him, and so they drag him out of the temple, and they're about to beat him to death, but someone calls the police, which happens to be the Romans. So the Roman guards show up to arrest Paul, but Paul mentions to him, they said, hey, listen, I'm not only Jewish, Mr. Roman guard, I'm also a Roman citizen. Now this changes everything, because every Roman citizen gets a trial. So they send Paul to Rome for that trial. So here's what happens. They put him on a ship to go to Rome, where he gets lost at sea for 2 weeks because of a bad windstorm. Well, after being shipwrecked then for 3 months, they finally get to Rome. And he's in prison, and understand, these prisons there, they aren't like prisons today. The floor is hard, the food, if they even get any, is really, really bad, and he's chained to a different Roman soldier every 8 hours. And this is going on for 2 to 3 years while Paul's awaiting a trial for a crime. Guess what? He didn't even commit. So if anyone has the right to complain, it's Paul. But I want you to listen to these words that he writes while in prison. He says this, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Grumbling also means complaining. Now, here's what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean that we never confront. There are times where we must confront injustice or wrongdoing. It also doesn't mean that we don't have tough conversations, but we always have those tough conversations out of love. Now notice he says this. He says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. So the standard, let's be honest, it doesn't get any higher than everything. Whatever we do, wherever we are, whoever we are with, do everything without complaining or arguing. Now, why would Paul say everything? Well, I believe Paul knew there were both spiritual and practical reasons to live this way. If you're a Jesus follower, there is a lot of spiritual reasons to live this way. Imagine if every time that we complain, it's not just about our circumstances or about our boss or the traffic, but what if in God's eyes we are actually complaining about Him? That's how Paul wants us to see it. Now, the reason Paul wants to see it this way is because Paul understood the source of all our complaining. You see, you complain for the same reason I complain. I complain because I'm not getting what I think I deserve, from God. At the source of all our complaining is this: entitlement. In other words, it's all about you. It's all about me. Think back to what you complain about the most. I mean, why do you complain about it? Once you get through all the, well, she doesn't and should and supposed to, and that's unfair, I'm not getting what I think I deserve. And as a result, I complain about it. So there are some deep spiritual issues we should do, and why we should do everything without grumbling. Now, even if you're not a Jesus follower, I think there are practical reasons that we should live without complaining. There's actually a doctor named Dr. Travis Bradberry, and he wrote a good book, great book actually, called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And he's just done a lot of research on the idea of complaining. And what he says is that repeated complaining conditions the brain to do, guess what? More complaining. He and others talk about what it means to have this kind of negative mindset, that before long, we enter into what they call confirmation bias. In other words, we expect something to be bad, therefore, we get what we expect. Now, I don't know about you. I just don't want to go through life preconceived to find the bad, when there's already enough bad in the world. I want to train my mind to find that which is good and helpful and hopeful. This is why Paul follows up with this. He says, so do everything without grumbling, because it contaminates, because it's all about what I think I deserve. It's all about what God is not doing or arguing, so that. In other words, there's a purpose attached to this. You may become blameless. Now, blameless means just to be without fault. You know, here's what's interesting. He could have said, okay, don't lie or cheat or swear or steal so that you might become blameless. But think about this. When we complain to another person, it forces the other person to choose. You know, either I don't agree with you, which means we lessen some potential for influence, or I do agree with you, and I have still lessened my influence. You may become blameless and pure, he says, and listen to this, children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. So what Paul's doing here is he's actually quoting something that Moses said. Our guy Moses comes back again in Deuteronomy 32. Because now I'm not focused on what I think I deserve and blaming you and blaming God because I'm not getting what I think I deserve. Then, here's the outcome. He says, you will shine among them like stars in the sky. The result is we will have influence with the people around us because the people around us will want to be around us. I want to give you two big ideas that we see from how Paul taught and lived. And these two ideas will go a long way in helping us do everything without complaining. Here's the first idea. If you can change your circumstances, then do something about it. You know, if there's something negative, unpleasant, not right, something that you wish that you could change, and you could do something about it, then here's the thing. Do something about it. In other words, we're not going to go through a life and just pretend like everything is okay. You know what? When it's not okay. It's not wrong to notice something that's wrong. However, it is wrong when we start to complain, and then we just do nothing about it. You know, we've all seen this. You know a couple that is not getting along and the relationship is on life support, so to speak, one or both and they talk with you about it, and then you encourage them. And you encourage them to do something about it, to get help. But instead of doing anything about it, they just continue to complain and complain and complain about the other person. Or you've seen a different response. You encourage them to do something about it, and one or both, they start to take steps to work on it. And they go to counseling, they start going to church, they join a small group, they begin to read books. They don't keep complaining about it, which never helps. They don't keep putting cryptic comments on social media about marriage. You know what they do? They do something about it. If you can change your circumstances, then do something about it. Here's the second idea. If you can't change your circumstances, then here's the thing. Change your perspective. The reality is there are times when, we can't change our circumstances. And when that happens, we change what we can change. And we can always change our perspective. For example, we can change what we say about it. We can change how we think about it. We can change what we see in those circumstances. One of the questions we all have when we read what Paul said here is this: how could Paul write do everything without complaining when he had every reason to complain? Because Paul understood this very important truth. If I can't change it, God must have allowed it. And allowed it doesn't mean that God caused it. I mean, if God has allowed it, here's what it does mean. It means He must want to do something in it. You see, for Paul, he wasn't the center of his own story. He wasn't the main character because Jesus was. And so he knew that his part was to pour out whatever was in his cup, no matter his circumstances. Do you know how we pour out what is in our cup? Let me give you some examples here. If you're single, are you pouring your life into someone who is younger than you? Are you pouring into a need? Husbands, have you invested fully in your wife, serving her and loving her the way that God called you to? Wives, are you pouring your life out to serve those around you, including your husbands? Parents, moms and dads, have you emptied yourself into your kids, teaching them to make wise decisions that honor God and honor others? Students, pour your life into the people around you who other kids write off. Paul says, when I pour out my life, I have this deep sense of joy because now my perspective is different. Because I have shifted the focus from getting my cup filled and complaining about it when I don't think I get what I deserve, and it's kind of like it's about me, to pouring out my cup, which is about others. Complaining is a sign that I have put myself at the center of my story. But when Jesus is at the center, it takes the focus off of me and changes how we let our story be told.